A very good afternoon and welcome along to this week's Late Bite Lunch. I'm absolutely delighted that joining us today is Brendan Murphy, who has been a regular contributor to the show over the last 2 years, taking us on his experiences on his escape from Ukraine, and who promised to come back to us as soon as the book was written and tell us all about it. And we've reached that point where the book is now written. So we'll be chatting with Brendan more about that in a few minutes. But in the meantime, pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, sit back and enjoy with us a Light Bite Lunch. Good afternoon. Well, good afternoon, Brendan, and I hope the weather has been good to you up around the Cooley Mountains there. Brendan, for those who haven't seen you before, perhaps you just give us a little snippet into the life shot of who Brendan Murphy is.
Well, that's a very good question, and it depends if who's asking, especially the guys that have no idea who the man would be. I'm from the Irish diaspora who returned home. Our rare outside of Ireland, unfortunately, and that was in the mix of Irish and Polish and Ukrainian people, and returned as soon as the economy could bear more than one punt, which would be 1996. I work as a business consultant. I've worked many countries across Europe and across the wider world. And currently doing work with a bank in Dublin in terms of technology and integrate meeting compliance requirements. So for a long time now, since 1998, I've lived in the Cooley Mountains in a 300-year-old house that I've built bigger and more modern than it was. And generally, you know, I've worked supporting businesses and lived in a very, very very friendly, very welcoming community up in the mountains.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a good snapshot of who it is you are. So you have a very long time connection with Ukraine, and it only dawned on me when I was putting the bits together for today's show that we've never actually spoken about how your connection with Ukraine started in business.
Right. So, as I said, as a child, I was brought up in a foreign land, and there were Ukrainians there, one of whom would be a friend of mine who I didn't know what Ukrainians were until there was a convent garden party, and we were doing the Irish dancing and they were doing the hopak, which is a Ukrainian dance. But in terms of business, it's about 1997 when a company recruiting for IBM and Microsoft and others, they were recruiting Ukrainians who are exceptionally good at computer sciences into Ireland, and the recruitment company was kind of struggling a fair bit. And being a business consultant, I was asked to see if I could help them. And it started from that point onwards, really.
All right, so that was your initial introduction there, and I know you've since built up a fabulous love affair with the country as a whole.
Yeah, and travel widely. I have friends there. I've never been one for being with expats or people who are not. I like to be with local people, right? It's it's in my nature I prefer to be with local people than people from other places. And so I would have built up contacts with business people and friends, and those friendships build and build and become part of your extended family, really, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And again, from my own time living in Crete, I have to admit, I much more enjoyed the company of the locals, even if I did struggle with the language, but it was still lovely to have that connection and to see exactly how the locals live day to day, and realizing that while they may have very different belief systems, while they may have very different climates, day-to-day life can largely be exactly the same as it would be for a family here.
I think so, definitely. And, you know, the things around family and friends and, you know, what you do at the weekends or your time off, there's a lot of similarities, what sports people like. You know, you find there's a similarity as well as the difference. If you're staying with people, living with people, being friends with people, if you're an outsider looking inside and being a stranger to the local people, you learn very little.
Yes. So, before we get into discussing the book, and I will say to anyone, if you haven't got a copy yet, go and grab a copy. It's a fabulous read. I am only about 3/4 of the way through it, but it really does give you an insight away from media claims, away from the sensationalism that some media outlets will provide, irrespective of whether politically driven or otherwise, to read somebody who is actually living it, who doesn't have that same political agenda, does make really, really, in some ways, I even go to saying it's almost bizarre reading it. You're reading it and saying, in this day and age, can this really be happening? But we will come to the book in a couple of minutes, so that we're not going to take time away from it. As you know, every guest who comes on the show is asked about their favorite light bite lunch. And I know yours changes with the season, so I thought, seeing as where we are, we'd ask you what's the latest craving.
Well, I mean, to be fair, now we're coming up to Patrick's Day, so you know, then you're going to start looking at, if you're a dove, you're looking at codle, and if you're looking, you know, there's a bit of Colcannon that's on my mind as well. I like that type of traditional Irish food that's not just ours and suited our climate, right? You know, the Irish stews, that kind of thing. So a light bite lunch for me would be some beef with potatoes, carrots, onions, celery. I know that's a bad thing, don't put celery in Irish food. I know, but it's tasty. And just put it in a pressure cooker, cut everything in big pieces, and 10, 15 minutes later, you have the very best of Irish flavors, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
And for lunch, you know?
Absolutely. You can't beat it. I mean, for me, for Patrick's Day, it has to be corned beef, cabbage, a little bit of champ, and some parsley sauce.
Oh yeah, the problem with champ is you start eating champ, you're not going to stop till August, and that's not good for me.
Yes, absolutely agree with you. Absolutely. So, if we move on to the book, it's called War in Ukraine: An Irishman's Journey.
Yep.
It must have been exceptionally emotional to relive everything as you were writing it.
Well, the whole point of writing it is to take the emotion away. During the time, you had no emotion. You had emotion, you'd be dead, right? Yeah. And there were millions of people on the road, and there was no honking of horns. There was no aggression. There was nobody leaving anybody stuck. You know, there was no selfishness. There was little bits and pieces, but a lot of that were not Ukrainian people, but foreign people who thought that they had a priority over everybody. And out of panic more than kind of character. But, you know, the reality is that the kindness of strangers was an important piece of this. And in reality, if I don't write it and get rid of it. I was going to live with it. And it wasn't my best friend, and it was definitely not my best experience. So I wanted to get it from me. And the way that I could do it is by writing it.
Yeah. Well, I know way back when you first appeared on the show, I think it was Maggie Geraghty who messaged at the time saying you should write a book about your experiences.
Yeah.
And she has actually just messaged there to say, well done on the book. It's such an achievement.
Well, thank you. You know, I appreciate that. And it was a good call out, to be honest. And one of the reasons I wanted it to be published, if not the only reason, is that I needed somebody to make me write it and not just write a few pages, then forget about it. But the fact that the publisher was saying, Brendan, where's the chapter? Where's 3 chapters? Where's the 10 chapters? That helped a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was asked a question earlier by someone else who saw you were coming on the show. Is the audiobook available? Their site isn't good enough for reading at this stage, and they would love to actually hear the audiobook.
Well, nobody wants to hear my voice for longer than a few minutes, to be fair. But my publisher is a global publishing house, and they have rules about this type of thing. It needs a certain volume of sale. It needs a certain demand. And then they'll put these other things in there, you know, and we'll see.
So it's watch this space, and the audiobook may be on the way in the not too distant future. Well, if you're looking for somebody to voice it, Brendan, we can certainly talk.
Yeah, why not?
Right.
Why not? It's out of my hands. It's this big publisher who says, and they tell me very little because they look at me and say, "You have no idea what you're talking about." So you just sit there and we'll do our job.
You sit over there and we'll tell you where we want you to promote it when, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
As you were writing the book, and something I felt from the parts that I have read, there must have been intense anger at times when you think back on the way what you very much regard as your home was being attacked. How do you manage?
Not really.
There you go. Yeah, we thought we'd lost you there, Brendan. How do you?
That's the Russians. They don't like talking about these things. Not anger so much. Certainly enormous upset.
Yes.
Right. And maybe that's because I wrote it when it was fresh. That, you know, the stages of grief were in the shock, the early stages, you know, the anger piece hadn't, and I'm not necessarily, I mean, I don't think I'm an angry person especially, but I think that my anger is just at a very refined, pure white anger, which I know that if I ever let it out, I'd end up spending time in Mountjoy, which I don't want to do. Yeah. So I know it's there, it's in a box, it's never going to be left out of that box, it has to stay in that box, because if I started getting angry, then terrible things might happen. And I don't need that in my life, to be honest.
Right, but like psychologically, having seen what you've seen, having seen the devastation all around you, I think the fact of how much help you had along the way and seeing the pure goodness of people will have aided that in some ways.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Not wanting to, damage their goodness by doing something bad is part of this as well. And I think, I mean, I remember Bobby Sands saying, you know, our revenge will be the laughter of our children, and I am from that belief of, you know, if you betray with anger and hatred, you know, the promise of the next generation, you don't betray your enemy, you betray your family. And I think very strongly that you have to conduct yourself where people will be genuinely uplifted and inspired by what you say and do, not devastated and disappointed, right? So anger is one of those things that nobody's going to buy into. It's not a good emotion. It doesn't do nearly as much as it could.
Absolutely. Now, your hometown in Ukraine of Irpin was one of the first attacked.
That's right.
And I know that extensive rebuilding work has already started there. What stage is the rebuilding of Irpin at, or has it had to stop because of further attacks? Or
No, it continues on a daily basis, and it's in different forms. You have the local authority and the big governments like the Japanese, Canadians, the French. Their leaders came to the bottom of my street, took photographs of shattered buildings and said, we'll pay to fix this. So there's money for that kind of big, repairs. For especially tower blocks, this type of apartment block type things. And, and the roads and bridges, the expensive stuff, you see that being fixed. On the local level, people, like, for example, I've just spent a large amount of money repairing my house because, I paid for the roof and all of the glass was smashed. And in a way, I was unlucky and lucky at the same time in that they parked the tank in the garden and blew up everybody else's house. But they couldn't shoot mine. They shot it with the tank machine gun type thing. So the bullets this big are stuck in the walls and stuff that you can't get them out. Well, they've got them out last week and filled the holes. But you just have big holes instead of, big giant, missile holes or tank round holes. And some of the properties were so damaged around me that they were knocked down completely and taken away, and it's just gone. But repairing it, a lot of people are repairing their houses like that out of their own money because they realize it'll, by the time, if they waited for government money, they'd be dead of old age. So, people are getting on and rebuilding. So there's always that activity, all of that, trying to make things better. But there are people who don't have any money and they don't have any means to get money, and so there's houses that are not repaired and not going to be repaired for a long time. So you've got that mixture, and you also have the fact that so much is a commemoration of lives lost, and it's very difficult. That the sandpit was a burial place for a couple of people, and now the children are playing on it again, and there's an unease around that type of thing. That if somebody was killed and buried on the corner of your house, like mine was, you don't want to disturb that ground, because even though the bodies have been reinterred somewhere else, it's somebody's. But it's like if there's a car accident on Ireland's roads and there's this little kind of shrine put to them, you don't want to be taking it all away and cutting the grass, because it's somebody else's shrine. So there's all of that kind of thing. There's a lot of sensitivity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to change the direction from it, but before we do, we've another comment coming in for you there. Brendan is a great representative for Ukraine. He's so sincere and passionate about Ukraine and Ukrainians. They must feel very grateful to him. That's from Monique.
Well, Monique, they probably don't know anything about it. I try to be a good Irish person, to be honest. And I recently helped a Ukrainian family and an Irish family whose father had died and the house was empty. And the Irish family didn't know what to do with it. And the Ukrainian family were homeless here, and the husband, the father, had been killed just a couple of months ago in fighting in the war. So putting them together kind of was something that worked well. But I wouldn't want anyone to be grateful. I just do what I do, and I'm here. And then when I'm dead and buried, everybody will forget about me and think about somebody who's alive and kicking. So I don't do it for any other thing other than it makes me feel good. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. But so just to change directions for a few minutes, and again, you mentioned there about family, so it's a good time to actually ask you this. We have two upcoming referenda on the family. Are you as confused by everyone else in the choice of wording, or do you think it's all very, very clear and Michael McDowell and others have got it totally wrong, that the wording is missing?
Yeah, my personal view is that the Constitution in the past has been hijacked by interest groups, and I don't want to annoy anyone, but certain institutions, certain politicians, certain things have dragged the Constitution into an understanding and meaning that it doesn't have, or it shouldn't have, or it wasn't intended to have. I don't think people standing on the steps of the GPO, when you look at the women who have come and on and who fought for Ireland's independence, you wanted to be treated, any differently to based on gender or family status. And I think anything in the Constitution or any explanation of the Constitution that sets an equality between men and women and family, one type of family and another, all of that needs to be taken away, right? Because Ireland fought hard and lost a lot to get its independence, and we've still not fully got it yet. And we are emotionally not independent. But I do think here that people need to sit back and say, well, what are they trying to say that's wrong with the Constitution? And if they say there's a bit that creates something that's not equal, well, let's get rid of that, right? Because, in 1916, it was men and women who were equal, fighting for the rights, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Before we go on, it is time to make very quick mention about this. Indeed, the Micro Business Awards are in full swing, and they're gone out to judges this week. So judges will be working their way through all the entries and trying to analyse and look at all the different various compilations of how things stack up. And so they'll all be doing that. You can still vote in the People's Choice category. To do that, you go to irishmicrobusinessawards.ie/enter.html. Go down to the entry page and you can vote for your favourite business there in the People's Choice Awards. The finals this year are in October in Knightsbrook and Trim, and tickets are now available. If you would like to book tickets, you can drop an email to microbusinessawards@gmail.com with the subject tickets, and we can organise to get your invoice out to you for your tickets at that stage. And we look forward to catching up with you all in October, and more to the point, look forward over the coming weeks to announcing who all the finalists are. So, coming back then to Ukraine as a whole.
Yes.
What are you hearing the mood is currently?
Right, okay. So this war is a very real war, and there was a lot of progress, and the Russians were moved out a lot of Ukraine. And that obviously gave people confidence. But there's an enormous pain. There's a collective sense of loss. There's a lot of, the whole grief process is at a community level, not a family level, which is there. But I mean, people are steadfast and they're fighting hard, and people are dying, unfortunately, because of two reasons. One is you have evil, which is the Russian state, who's caused this war and are taking Russian nationals to fight this war, and they're taking people from Africa and North Korea and other places to fight as well. But we also have a problem that the Ukrainians don't understand, I'm not sure I do, is why the West that was, created this impression after World War II that we defend the rights of people, and we're not doing it, right? Ireland hasn't paid any money, made no contribution to this peace and security of the world in the last period of crisis. Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, many countries, Japan, many countries have said, right, we have and we can contribute. Ireland has not done any of that, right? They've done small things. The Irish Rangers are training people how to fight, which is a fact. There are individual Irish soldiers who are fighting, that's a fact. But, you know, Ireland has enormous and misunderstood capabilities, both militarily and financially, right? And this country is a massively wealthy country, and the inequality in wealth gives us the impression that we don't have money, but that inequality is a political inequality. But our availability of funds is massive. It's just how we are spending it, which is a political question and a political answer, right? So Ukrainians are saying, well, hang on, you guys said that if we get rid of nuclear weapons, you would defend us, but you're not defending us. You're not even giving us the weapons that we need and a minimum. Because pro-Russians in America and in other countries, and we have our own pro-Russians, by the way. Ireland has problems with pro-Russians in government, in politics and in community as well. And we're a silent voice. We're kind of the shy boy in the corner going, well, you know, I don't know. What do you think? I don't know. And that's not Ireland of 2024. Ireland should know. It should know where it's at.
Yeah, and Monique is just asking, how do you feel about the US aid being cut back? Is this not very dangerous in the whole situation?
It's immensely dangerous from 3 points of view, right? One is it's clearly pro-Russian, but it's pro-Russian, pro-Iran, pro-North Korea, pro-China to do what they're doing, right? It's bigger than this conflict. So there's a global conflict that we have. The second thing is that because the Americans are setting a standard, it allows other countries to set their own lower level, including Ireland, right? So if they're not doing it, well, why would we? The third thing is it's causing a question mark about, you know, what is our moral compass as a society? In the 80s and 90s, we knew what it was, right? You know, good was democracy, freedom of gender, freedom of sexuality, freedom of, you know, you were your own individual, you know, entity, and you chose your direction in life. What this war is all about is other people having power over you, telling you what you can be, what you can't be, how you feel, how you love, and it goes back to the Constitution question that you were asking before. It's whether we have an independence of being or whether you get society which will shape you into a rigid format. And that's part of why some of these Americans are pro-Russian. And that's why Christian, the Christian fundamentalists are pro-Russian, because it's authoritarian, because you get to tell other people how to live their lives. And it's very, very dangerous. And we don't get that. We don't understand that, right? In other countries, like in Germany, the ordinary people in Germany understand it very well, that this is very definitely, you're not going to be able to wear your hair in pink and blue and yellow. You're not going to be able to wear what clothes you want. You're not going to be free to pick your own career. You know, you're not going to be free to define your family as you feel your family is defined, right? Because they just say, no, there is none of this is allowed. There is only two genders. There's only one model of family. There is only one model of education, and any book would be banned and destroyed, which is happening in America. And that's this authoritarian that is basically it's kind of resonating with this Russian authoritarianism and this evil, murderous, approach.
I'm really concerned that the time is going to run out on us, Brendan. Brendan, where can people get your book, War in Ukraine: An Irishman's Journey? How can people get it?
Well, Amazon.com. It is published by an international publisher, so it's available in every country, in Japan, in Germany, in Ireland, everywhere else. they are working on getting it into places like Eason's and that kind of thing. That's the publisher's job. And they want local stores to stock it, right? But if you go on and just put War in Ukraine and Irishman's Journey, you'll see a web page, Google search page with a whole long list of different suppliers. But Amazon.com typically is
great.
The online site.
And before we finish then, what is the best way if people would like to get in touch with you, Brendan? Is it still LinkedIn the best way, or?
Either that or, brendan.murphy@email.com, right? They can send me an email. And it's his email, not Gmail. You get hold of me then.
Great. Well, listen, Brendan, thank you so much for coming back to us when the book is written. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. Will be another book we'll be discussing when we will have Phil Herbert talking about her life, having had teenage pregnancy, giving up the child and meeting the child again, being reconnected many years later. It's again another amazing read. And Phil will be joining us in 2 weeks' time for another Lite Bite Lunch. So until then, we'll bid you all a very good afternoon and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.